Welcome to A1TV, the Mark Show, and another week, another guest, another interesting chapter, interesting story about a guy. And it's funny how things come to fruition when you think about what sort of person you're going to interview and what sort of guest you're going to get on the show for the Mark Show on A1TV. But today, we're going to talk to Dave Griffin, or David Griffin. Griffo, welcome to the show.
Stoney, it's awesome to be here. This is great. I've been watching your interviews from afar, my friend, and very impressive. This is that you're on the way. You're a superstar in the making. But thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Griffo, we were talking about this yesterday. We're having a bit of a prelude into the interview about where you and I met, and we talked about Stereo 974 FM in the Brooklyn car park of a car where they were selling cars or car wrecks, and it was Rod Boyd and Bobby Taylor and Stereo 974 on a Saturday morning about 8 o'clock, and the Puma Sports Show. Griffo, tell me about the Puma Sports Show and how that come about.
The Puma Sports Show. Gee, that's a long time ago, Stoney. You haven't aged a bit, let me tell you. You're the same looking rooster that you were back then as you are now. The Puma Sports Show was born out of, I think, the great John Forbes, who passed away not long ago this year. And there wouldn't be many people that would be listening or watching this that wouldn't know Forbesy. I was very close to Forbesy. So fundamentally, Puma supported a community radio show that, I guess, brought superheroes to life. Like some of those guests that we had were unbelievable. You know, the captains of cricket teams and AFL footballers and boxers and runners and Olympians. And this little community show had these great stories. And Forbesy, for myself, Forbesy was good enough to sort of include me. And we touched on Forbesy, you and I, yesterday. And, you know, he's one of the great men of Melbourne sport. He wasn't an AFL footballer. He wasn't an Australian cricketer. He wasn't someone that ran the 100 metres in 10 seconds. John Forbes worked for Puma and fundamentally supported people. And I love him. I miss him a lot. I really miss him. But, you know, he brought us together. So I know you through John Forbes, and I'm really glad. But, you know, it was a tragedy that he passed away this year. And I think about him all the time. But back to your original question, he put the Puma Sports Show together. And Puma supported what is this little grassroots community show that brought great stories to people. And I think when you think back on it, Stoney, that I think Forbes that's what I like personally. I like stories and like bringing them to life. And you know what? And I just thought of that now. I think he did that for me. That's how important he is in my life, and obviously very important for the Puma Sports Show.
Now, you watch cycling at the moment. There's a guy that you might see. We know the famous Phil Leggett. There's a guy that used to sit in the background called Matt Keenan. Now, Matt Keenan was a massive part of the Puma Sports Show, and now I watched him and listened to him. He's on the world stage commentating cycling. Now, Matty was a big part of the Puma Sports Show way back then, and it show's not about Matty, but we had Bobby Henderson, obviously, you know, Fitzroy, and there were some personalities on that show that have done some amazing things in life.
Well, I think, you know, and Matty's awesome, isn't he? He's got a great knowledge on cycling. I'm not a cycling expert, but I love watching. I love listening to him. So he's the new Phil Leggett. He is, and I'm not kidding, he's the new Phil Leggett. So, you know, all of these people came from Forbesy. You know, they're all from John Forbes at Puma. Bobby Henderson played for Victoria. Now, Bob had a great demeanour with people who listened to him. Bobby had a fantastic demeanour. So, you know, Forbesy was the person, or John Forbes was the person that got us all together, and I love it. Absolutely love it.
Okay, let's take it back to your life. The story goes of how your life's unfolded to where you are today. Shepparton boy, born in Shepparton. What Shepparton club was it? Oh,
Stoney, the great Shep United Football Club, the D's. You know, there are Deakin Reserve. Deakin Reserve's the big oval. They have the grand finals up there, and it's the home ground for the Shepparton Bears and the really good club, the Shep United Footy Club. So I grew up as a demon. Little demon started when I must have been 9 or 10, I think, earlier even. Shepparton's the centre of the earth, Stoney. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know. Michael Barlow's from Shepparton.
Michael Barlow, who ended up at Werribee, of course, with you. So some good people up in Shep. Mum and Dad are still up there. It's been a bit tough during COVID to get back, obviously. But, yeah, love Shep. I've great memories of Shep. Great memories.
So how did you go? Now, you were drafted to Sydney in around about 1991. So how did you get from Shepparton to Sydney? How did that happen?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think I could have been potentially the worst drafted player ever, Stoney. If there's a prize for that, that's me. I went to Bendigo and did nursing. So did VCE or HSC back then in Shep, went across to Bendigo to do nursing, played with South Bendigo, and we won a couple of premierships under Peter Bradbury. and I got a couple of kicks basically, and I think Sydney thought they'd give me a go. So I went up to Sydney as this young 20-year-old, 19 or 20, I think. It's a long time ago now, and had a go. Warwick Cap was back there. It was the days of Bernard Toohey and Greg Williams, fantastic players, and I think they were probably on the end of their career a little bit. So there was an opportunity for it to get a game, and I didn't. Got injured early. Ended up going back to Bendigo, and I had a really great experience in Bendigo playing with Bradders. Fantastic group of people. We've got great memories. We have reunions of those couple of premierships all the time. So it was fantastic. Do I have regret about Sydney? A little bit. You know, we all want to be that bloke that plays 100 games. I wasn't, but I ended up, it's funny. I thought, talking to someone about this the other day, we all dream of running onto the MCG, don't we? As kids, I remember when I was 5 or 6 sitting on a footy next to my granddad, and my granddad was a Saints supporter. Loved the Saints. And we would listen to the transistor radio, and the Saints were never on because they were ordinary, Stoney. They were ordinary back in the 70s. They were just terrible. So we'd talk about footy with my granddad, and I just dreamt about running out onto the MCG on grand final day. And you know what had actually happened? So I wanted to be as a player, but I ended up, strangely enough, I was runner for Hawthorn in 2008, and I ended up running out as runner. So I think at one stage I was running next to Hodgie. I closed my eyes, Stoney, for a second. I pretended I was a player for a second. So you know what? It's funny where I've got certainly regrets of not being that Brownlow medalist for Sydney. I've got, you often think back and you wish things go left instead of right, or you zigged instead of zagged, but I certainly wasn't good enough. But I did get to run out into the MCG, and I did close my eyes for a second and imagine that I was playing. So, look, good days, good memories.
Tell me about your early days. Tell me about the time you did spend in Sydney. What were your early recollections of Sydney as the place, or being a young bloke in Sydney?
Oh, I wasn't mature enough, mate, to be honest. I love Sydney. I was a country kid. So, I didn't ever want to live in this. I looked at Melbourne when I was growing up, and I just disliked it. Disliked the fact that people were packed in together. I was pure country. I wore flannelette shirts and jeans, mate. So going into Sydney was just a different world. Would it be any different if I went to a different club? I went to Geelong, maybe. I'm not sure. But, Sydney, the harbour, the people, Bondi, King's Cross. I was a 19, 20-year-old kid from Shepparton. I had no clue. I remember rocking up to first training session, and I fell over backwards in a drill, and Bernard Toohey gave me a clip. Basically said, "Welcome to the big leagues." I'm this young kid from Shep, and big bad Bernard Toohey has given me a little clip. So it was a rude awakening, and it was just a tough time. I probably struggled with it, to be honest, and as such, came back and played back in Bendigo.
Yeah, so let's move forward to back in Melbourne, and because you had a year off of footy, and then you went to the Box Hill Footy Club. So how did you get to Box Hill? Because you talked about running for Hawthorn and spent some time under John Murphy at Box Hill, and as you said to me before, 5-time best and fairest winner and legend of Fitzroy Footy Club. But how did you get to Box Hill?
When I got the axe from Sydney, I went back to Bendigo, and we played in a premiership, which was awesome. Terrific memories. But I think I cracked it with the world, mate, to be honest. I wanted to travel, so I just up and travelled. I went and played Gaelic footy in Ireland for a year. And that was a strange experience. I'm a pro runner. I still go to the Stall Gift now as an old bloke. So I went and ran Powder Hall at Scotland. I just wanted to get away. Footy was, as a young kid, as we talked about, I wanted to play footy. It wasn't going to happen for me. I wanted to play AFL footy. It didn't happen. So I went and just explored, went overseas, made some great friends, had some good experiences. And when I came back, I think I had 12 or 16 months overseas, came back, and I just wanted to play the best footy I could. So I ended up at Box Hill playing VFL under Murph. Fantastic, exceptional player, learnt lots. We weren't successful, unfortunately. We had some good years, we had some great games, but we didn't make finals whilst I was there. I think I was there for sort of 4 years. And then I started, corporately work became important, and I settled down, got engaged, and different things. Life was happening, Stoney. So footy became less important, I think.
Take me back to Ireland, Griffo. Take me back to playing Gaelic football and the transition of living in Ireland and playing Gaelic football. What was that like?
I tell you what, I've got a memory. It's funny. You're making me think of things I haven't thought for a long time, mate, so thanks. I remember it was freezing. So I ran in Scotland on New Year's Day. That's when their gift meeting's on. Their famous powder halls like the Stall Gift. It's their Stall Gift. It was freezing, and we were training. We were digging snow. So I went across to Ireland after I raced, and that was freezing, and met a guy, and I trialled for a couple of different clubs, and I ended up in Cork playing for a club called Glenbarntown, which was just outside Cork. It was I can't remember. It was A grade or Premier Division then. Trained, got a game. The first game. Now, Gaelic footy is very different. There's no tackling, very little contact, except for what I'm about to tell you. So the word had got around. My first game was on the bench. I rocked up, had no clue. There was probably 3,000 people there. So it's senior footy. It was packed. It's a big day. I ran on my first game. I picked the ball up and I got someone. I went sideways and bumped into somebody, and which is a normal course of events. Bit of a hip and shoulder in AFL footy. Well, this person wasn't supposed to do that. This person proceeded to do a Rocky Balboa on me. I think he landed 25 punches because I can't fight to save myself, Stoney. I had my gloves up, hiding behind this thing. This guy, and I'd heard about the Irish and fighting, but for a sport that wasn't physical, my God, I thought I was seeing stars. He threw the ball at me because apparently I offended him that I bumped into him. So he proceeded to let, he was probably a bit Mike Tyson-like. I felt like I was on the ropes, but it was almost like, hey, welcome to Gaelic footy, the physical non-contact sport. It's quite crazy, but it was fantastic environment. I worked in a gym, so I got to know some great people. The big issue in Ireland is weight. People like Guinness. Now, Guinness is a fantastic drink, and there's Beamish and there's Murphy's. There's a whole plethora of this stout or this Guinness type stuff. So the boys had to work really hard during the week so they could have a bit of a pint on the weekend. So that was new for me. So lots of guys come in. They're very funny. Lots of people. I had a great time, mate. I miss it. I actually miss it. Really miss it.
I picked up on something before with regards stall and running. So you as an attribute as a young child, a young kid, obviously you had skill in the running capacity. So was that something you could have taken up professionally? Did you take it up professionally? How did your running go? How did it come about?
Oh, I did. I love the Victorian Athletic League. I have forever. The stall gift and the romance of the stall gift. I was a good runner, but not a great one. State level, I might make finals at state level and finish seventh or eighth. So I wasn't great. Pro running and handicapping and the stories that come through, the stall gift and the betting plunges and, the magnificent history in professional foot running is what I love. So I proceeded to do that. Always wanted to win a 400 metres at stall. Didn't happen. And now I still run masters. I'm still part of it. My son, who's 22 years old, won a race at stall a couple of years ago. He won the Bill Howard, which is the novice race. So really proud of him. So as a family, we train together and we go to race meets, and it's just important to us. It's funny, Stoney, professional foot running is one of the most important sports in Australia, and it's a hidden sport.
It is.
Years and years ago, families lived or survived on the money they made in professional foot running. It was a bit like boxing, horse racing, greyhound racing, those sort of middle to low class sports. People thrived. I'm working on a new book that should be out next year, and I interviewed at the time Tommy Dean. Tommy Dean he won the 1946 stall gift, and at the time I interviewed him, he was the oldest living stall gift winner in Australia. Well, he bought a farm, bought a car on his stall gift winnings. People set themselves up, and it's interesting. I think people will remember the stall gift winner, but will they remember the Australian 100-metre champion? Yeah, probably not. I think there's so much romance in this sport that it just attracts me. So I've been part of it for a long time and love it. I'm not very good, particularly now. I'm not very good, Stoney. My sprinting's a bit of a fast waddle, but good friends, great people, and I love being part of it.
A few weeks ago back, I had Jason Richardson on the show, and the stall gift winner, 93, I think it was back then. And I want you to take the viewers, A1TV, the Mark Show, I'm talking to David Griffin. I want you to take me back, or take me inside stall, and what the stall gift's about, and what the mystique is about stall. Little country town in country Victoria, down in the Western Belt. What is it about stall that comes alive when the stall gift's on, Griffo?
It's actually difficult to articulate, mate, and I'll give it a go, but people need to go. You walk through Central Park stall, you walk through the gates that have been there hundreds of years, you rub yourself against the trees that have been there for hundreds of years. As you walk through the gates, you smell the grass. It almost thumps you in the chest, the smell of the grass and the lines. You look out onto the oval and you look up into the stands are full. The oval, there's people warming up. There are people wearing colours so traditional, Stoney, that take us back to the 1800s. There's something magical and amazing about the stall gift. It's almost, and I've tried to articulate this in Tom Dean's story, and I don't know, I think I've done an okay job of it, but it's almost a hand-me-down sport where families, like I have, handed the love down to my son, and it's a generational thing. It's beautiful, it's intoxicating, and once you're part of it, you can't get out. You cannot get out of pro running. And interestingly, you'll talk to people about the stall gift and they know it. They had a brother that did it, or a sister, or their cousin, or their uncle, or their granddads. There's some connection somewhere, but it's one of the most beautiful sports in Australia. And it's just like the Melbourne Cup. You know, we sit back and we had the Melbourne Cup yesterday and you know, Australia loved it. This is Melbourne Cup for humans. And I think you can probably tell, mate, I'm passionate about it and I love it.
I think that's a really good way to describe it. The Melbourne Cup for adults, I mean, it's for people, and you know, I watch it every year, and obviously it's not as profile as it was months before, but it's still there in the background, just sitting there. But it is an annual tradition, and people who have competed, been there, talk about it. They talk about it in glowing terms. It's just an amazing thing. So we'll park that there, because Griffo, your business life, what you've done in business, because we started off at Puma, wasn't it, first of all? Just tell me where you went from Puma and then onwards, where you've gone to.
Ended up at Nike following Puma, and you know what it's like. I think I was in the right place at the right time, Stoney. You know, you end up getting state jobs, you know, state manager roles and national manager roles, and then category manager roles. And I seemed to bluff lots of people, I think. So when I went from Puma to Nike, you know, a couple of jobs fell my way, and then ended up at, you know, Pacific Brands, and I was working with Dunlop with the great Michael Massey. Dunlop, I went and ran a women's fashion division. So I think it ended up being more about people and strategy and teams for me, rather than selling product. And I do love that. It sort of comes through with the people stories that I write about now. But eventually I ended up at, and I was CEO of an RTO. I wanted to educate kids. I had this heartfelt desire. How do we help kids and build confidence and resilience in kids? So I went from the sports industry to a women's fashion industry into education, you know, wanting eventually to help kids and how do we upskill and give them confidence to achieve things. So a little bit different, I think. And right now my business partner's Peter Derouch of North Melbourne Footy Club fame, and we're running this little brand called A1. So it's a connection back to my sports background, I guess. I'm still getting used to basketball. I love basketball, but I'm not a basketballer. And it's really good to meet people from different sports, I think, Stoney. So you can probably see a few shoes behind me. That's what we try and do these days, try and sell some footwear and apparel with AM1 for basketball. And it's been really nice. It's been really good. Tough gig in the last couple of years, like lots of people, but I'm still loving it. And we've still got our gloves up punching, Stoney.
Now, the piece of resistance for you, Griffo, and the one that I want to get out to the listeners is you're a writer. And you've written 3 books now, or 2.5 books, or 3.5 books, 2.5 books, maybe.
2.5 books, yep.
And I want you to tell the viewers about your first 2 books, because I want to sit on your 3rd book and have a really good conversation. So tell the viewers about the first 2 books you've written and why you've written the book.
Well, strangely enough, the books came out of the radio show over in the western suburbs. So I had my first child, Tom, and I was living in the east, and going to the west was just a lot of time taken, and I had to sort of spend some more time at home. But what I realised was, and I was doing a little program called the Heroes Show on a Saturday morning. So I was working with Forbesy on the Puma Sports show, and then doing the Heroes program where I'd interview a couple of local people and a superhero. So Forbesy helped me get the Buddy Franklins of the world and, you know, Mark Taylor, the cricket hero, and I'd mix them up and we'd talk for a couple of hours. And because I had family starting, I couldn't invest the time. So I started writing about the story and taping the interviews, basically. So all I thought was the fact that I'm speaking to these awesome people, but there's no difference between the superstar and the person that lives up the road. The butcher that's worked really hard to have his butcher shop, you know, comes from Croatia, you know, came into Australia, didn't have 2 bob to rub together, has a fantastic butcher shop. His resilience, persistence, and understanding of the world is just the same as Buddy Franklin's. I keep using him as an example, of course, but it's just the same as the superstar we talk about. So I decided to write about it. I wrote about community people. I wrote about some awesome other people. So I put all these together into a little book called Everyday Heroes, and we raised close to 20 grand, I think, for street kids, and we donated that to Open Family. Great experience, good people. I had some great people help me. And then the second book was somewhat the same, probably a little bit more about my writing improving too, Stoney. So A Journey So Far was the second book. Same deal, different sets of heroes. My writing was developing and I wanted it to develop. We raised somewhere between 40 and 50 grand for that book. I tried to set a charity up into trying to influence positively kids and started some school talks and just getting out amongst kids. And we donated lots of them. That was 40 to 50 grand, so that was good. And right now I'm working on my third book, which I hope's out next year. Similar thing, I've managed to interview 12 awesome people. I'm hoping the aim is to raise 100K to give significant money to some great charities. I think I've given up on the I want to start a charity situation. I think I've understood that my skill sets aren't quite in admin and red tape. So what I'm trying to do with this book, the one next year, and it's called It's My Life, or it's the working title, It's My Life. I'm sort of looking at charities as we speak, and I want to contribute to some what good people are doing. I want to contribute to other people's charities. So my job's to write the book, my job's to get the stories, and I'm trying to do that right now.
Tell me about the stories you're trying to create, Griffo. Tell me about the angle that you're trying to make this or take this book down. What's the big picture of this book? Because I want you to also talk about the school talks that you do, because I have a massive interest in people's development, or kids or child or anybody, it doesn't matter how old you are. I'm interested in the development of people. And so I'm interested about what the concept is and around the third book.
I think the concept really starts with my passion I'm driven by people, mate. I love people's stories. You know, I'll do an interview with you, for example, and it's almost like putting petrol in the car for me. The enthusiasm I get from someone else. So initially, I think it's a selfish thing. It's about me feeling good. So if I sit with somebody and I'm really grateful that they tell the story, but I feel good, mate. I feel good. So that's the start. From there, I just want to tell a really good yarn. And the group of people that have been awesome with their time in this book have come together because of sport. I think there's a sport theme running through all of the stories, but the main story isn't sport. The main story is their resilience through life. It's what they do, their focus, the examples that we can use. So I think, I'm very aware of what the stories do to me, mate. I love them. I love the subjects, but I then become very aware of what the stories could do for other people, and I become passionate about telling those stories. So sport brings this collection together, but life outside sport's the real point. And this is where I think some of the examples, and I'm not sure whether we do it well or not. I need to understand this a little bit more. Do we pull apart someone's stories, and how do we present those to kids so they can learn? I had with my second book, I used, and Mount Lilydale, that's out at Lilydale, was a college out there. I gave a bunch of kids some stories and I asked for feedback. So we used a class of 25 people, and it was a magnificent project. Like, we've got 14, 15, 16-year-old kids reading a story and feeding back to an author and feeling confident enough, Stoney, to give that feedback. You imagine what that does to that little young girl or young fella? Enormous. So I think everything for me is not only writing a story that I'm proud of and you might be proud of, or you have an emotional response to, but it's how we can help kids. So how do we encourage kids? How do we give them confidence? And I can see that little project that we did, and these people wrote me letters. The girls and boys wrote me letters on each of the stories that they read. That's powerful, mate. They are feeding back, and that was fantastic feedback. Some of it was good. Some of it was like a punch in the face, but that's good. We're building them up. So that's the point, I think. So the stories for me are, they generate enthusiasm from my end, but I really want to know and pull apart how we can use them to help other people. I think that's really important.
I think you hit on the head there. For me, the highs and lows, the emotions that people go through. Sometimes we don't get that young enough as a child. This is me, a bit of a thought process for me. But as a kid, we weren't taught that in school. And if you can enable children or anybody of any age to be able to express themselves without fear, is a really good way of documenting what you're doing. I think that Griffo, it seems to me that that's what you're doing, is getting a story or enabling children to express themselves without fear. I think that's a really good way to do it.
I think that's well put, mate. I think it is. The other thing with this too is I have a feeling, and I speak to teachers about this, I have a feeling that kids aren't reading. I have a feeling that we stare at phones. We do it, you and I do it, but I think this, and particularly my kids, they stare at their phone and don't read a book. So the other piece to this is, if we can make the book manageable, so, 12 stories of people where they can read these and finish a book, read one a night. And within 2 weeks, they finished a book. There's confidence in that too, mate. I finished a book. I didn't think I could read a book. I've read this book. How do I feel? I feel great. That's the other part. You know, there's layers to this, I think, and maybe I make it a little bit more complex than it should be, or put too much thought into it, mate. But I find that I get driven by people and what they do, and I'm trying to apply that to create confidence in kids, and that's what I'm trying to do. I know, you know, the thing is, I don't need much personally. I just need people to talk to me. I've had some. Guess what I found, and we haven't spoken about this before, but I found a guy who lives in country Victoria in a farm. He's got a farm just north of Kyneton. He's got a band that Pearl Jam and Nirvana have openly said have inspired them. Can you believe that? I found a guy, and he's a world powerlifting champion. His name's Ross Knight. He's the lead singer of the Cosmic Psychos, and his best mate's Eddie Vedder. He's a farmer in Kyneton, and he's the most wonderful story you'll ever come across, ever. And there's a hint. So I've got Ross Knight. There's a little hint of a story that's in this book. These people exist, Stoney. This guy's best mates with the lead singer of Pearl Jam, twice, world powerlifting champion twice, lead singer of this band that has influenced the best ever, and he's a farmer. I mean, my God. So I think I just like finding these little nuggets and just bringing them forward, you know. I get excited about it, I think.
I can hear and see and feel the passion in your voice, Griffo, and that's why I wanted to get you on, just to chat about your life story and about what you're doing in life and community. And that's what this show's all about. A1TV, the Mark Show, is about bringing people to life, bringing stories to life, and you've expressed it tonight on this show. So, Griffo, thanks for joining on the A1TV, the Mark Show. Great to chat to you. And I'm sure in a couple of weeks' time, you and I will catch up because I've got an idea for you.
Well, I tell you what, Stoney, what I wanted to ask you was about your show. Now, we've run out of time.
That's
right. So I wanted to flip this a little bit and ask about you, but we'll do that next time. No. Hey, it's been fun. Hey, thanks for having me. It's been really good fun.
Hey, thanks, Griffo. We'll catch up. See you then.
Thank you.